1. Okay, before I get into the story, there's a few things I need to explain about my country, South Africa, for you to fully understand this story. In South Africa, it's normal to have high brick walls with electric gates, electric fences, alarms, etc. The crime here is hectic. It's also pretty normal to have big gardens. My family and I are big animal lovers, so at the time we had 6 dogs, 2 Shar-Peis, 2 German short-haired pointers, and 2 Dachshunds. With that being said, our dogs roam freely in and out of the garden, as it's obviously enclosed. We usually leave the veranda door open during the day for them to do their thing. Another thing about South Africa, it's normal to have a live-in domestic worker, a maid and gardener. Like the average family usually employs them, it's not only for wealthy people, which seems to be a thing in other countries. For the story, our domestic worker is Ellie, and our gardener is Vince. So this happened in 2007 when I was 9 years old. My older brother, 10, and I had just gotten our first cell phones that day. My dad surprising us after work. You may think it's a bit young, but it was used for emergencies or to communicate with our parents. Anyways, it's an important piece of info for the story. We don't usually leave our veranda door open at night due to security reasons, but I remember it being a hot summer night that night, so of course, this night of all nights, the veranda door was wide open, and the dogs were doing their thing in the garden. My brother and I were in my parents' room, setting up our new cell phones, all excited. Ellie's daughter, Anne, who's like an older sister to us, 18, was helping my brother and I. My dad was somewhere in the house, and my mom was in the bath. I specifically remember Anne having a comment about how the dogs would not shut up and how annoying it was. That's when I noticed it too. Sure, they'd bark, but it was usually the dachshunds that yapped, when the bigger dogs just chilled. Plus, it would only happen for a few minutes. Then they'd get over it. Something was different that night, as even the bigger dogs were barking non-stop. My dad appeared in his room and mentioned to us that he too noticed the dog's incessant barking, and he was going to check if everything was okay. No alarm bells went off in my head, and I don't believe my dad thought anything was amiss either, because my brother asked to investigate with him, and my dad agreed. I was obviously too engrossed in my new Sony Ericsson. My dad ventured out to our garden with my brother in tow. When my dad had noticed, the dogs were all grouped, growling and going nuts at a dark corner behind our in-the-ground swimming pool. The best way I can describe it is our garden beyond our pool hits like a slight decline, so we have a few steps leading down the hill to the bottom end of our garden. We usually have a lamp that lights up, but my dad had noticed how that lamp seemed to be off, which confused him because he could have sworn it worked the other night. Either way, my dad said he got this gut-wrenching feeling because of this, and because of how out of character the dogs were acting. He called after them. They'd usually come running, but tonight they all seemed to just look at him, then turn back around and continue going crazy at this dark corner down the steps. My dad told my brother to go back inside the house and get a torch, sort of using it as an excuse for my brother not to come with him because of this off feeling. When my brother went back inside, my dad slowly approached the steps. He noticed how the dog seemed to be snapping at whatever it was hiding just out of view in the darkness. As he got to the steps, he noticed the lamp was smashed. Confused, he inched to the steps. As he put 2 and 2 together, it was way too late. My dad, being an ex-vet and avid hunter, felt something against his temple and immediately knew it was a gun. Out of the darkness stepped 4 other men in balaclavas, all armed. Shocked, he stood frozen on the steps. The man holding the gun to his head was instantly aggressive and asked him where my brother was. That he saw my dad had come out with my brother, but my brother went back into the house. Why? My dad said something came over him, and before he knew what he was saying, he responded with, "He's gone inside to press the panic button." As he said it, he saw how all of these guys started to panic. They started speaking in an African language called Zulu, assuming my dad couldn't understand. It's not common for white people to speak it. But my dad had actually grown up on a farm where he learned it fluently because of the farm workers. The aggressive guy holding the gun said in Zulu, "Shit, the cops will be here any minute. Let's just kill this fucker, grab what we can and go." The others seemed apprehensive, and the smaller guy seemed really on edge and continued to say how he can't go back to jail again, and they need to get the fuck out before the cops show, which would be any minute. He was panicking. My dad then fed on this guy's fear. My dad interrupted them, speaking English, pretending not to understand what they're saying, and said that we usually have armed response vehicles that drove in our area, and since my brother pushed the panic button so long ago, they'll probably be here any second, and that did it. My dad watched as their plan unraveled before them. The smaller, scared guys started freaking out all of the other guys, saying that they needed to leave ASAP or else they'd be caught. He seemed to make the others more nervous and lose confidence until they started full-on bickering amongst themselves, their plans slowly turning to shit, as a third guy had put it. The aggressive one, pointing the gun to my dad's head, slowly lowered it as they started fighting, losing focus on my dad and shifting his focus onto his crew. My dad then used this as an opportunity to slowly back up the steps and turn to dart to the house. As luck would have it, as my dad ran into the veranda door, my oblivious brother was heading out with a torch. My dad scooped him up under his arm and mid-ran and sprinted into the house, not even closing the door behind him, silly I know, but I think he just wanted to get my brother inside as quick as possible without even thinking. Anne and I were obviously oblivious to everything when my dad rushed through the bedroom door, slammed it shut, and told us to go upstairs into the attic. There's 5 guys outside with guns are here to hurt us. Get upstairs now. My heart sank. I remember my body automatically responding and me sprinting to the stairs with Anne right behind. My mom ran out of the bathroom in a towel not too far behind. We sat there in the darkness and silence. I swear you could hear a pin drop. I think we were all just waiting to hear something below us in the rooms. My mom cursed, saying she didn't have a phone, neither did my dad. But ha! In my hand was my brand new Sony Ericsson. No better emergency to use it than now, right? My mom dials the police, and I kid you not, they asked where we lived. We explained that they told us it wasn't in their jurisdiction. Sorry, click. The line goes dead. We are now not only shitting ourselves, but we're flabbergasted too. My mom starts cursing like a sailor again, and that's when my dad realizes, damn, he didn't close the veranda door. And what about Ellie and Vince, who are in their rooms, blissfully unaware of the danger they're in? He gets his firearm in the safe in the attic and tells us that whatever we hear, not to come downstairs, to stay hidden no matter what. Now I'm sobbing, begging my dad not to leave us, but he tells us that he has to go get Ellie and Vince before something bad happens to them. Now there's even more tears, as reality hits, that there's 2 other people still in danger. Anne, understandably in hysterics because she's also fearing for her mom downstairs. My dad disappears, and the air is thick with tension. We can still hear the dogs going crazy, indicating that those men were still on our property. My mom then calls another number, the armed security that drives around the area, and they say they'll be over in about 10 to 15 minutes. They say to wait and stay hidden until they ring our bell at the gate. We all wait in silence, fearing that we'll hear a gunshot or anything indicating these men are in our house. But there was just silence. The only sound was a dog's barks outside. After what seemed like hours, most likely a couple minutes, we heard stomping coming up the stairs and my heart rate quickened. I remember shutting my eyes and praying that it was my dad with Ellie and Vince. Luckily it was. We all hid for a while, no one dared to speak. The dogs seemed to have calmed down considerably, but were still barking every now and then. The gate intercom rang, and my dad told us to wait while he checked if it was the security company, and sure enough, it was. He opened up, and the nightmare was over. I remember standing up and my knees buckling from the adrenaline my body endured. The armed security somehow notified the right police, and everyone investigated the garden. They found that there were actually 7 pairs of footprints, and that these guys bent the spikes in our wall and just climbed over. We got an electric fence shortly after, so there must have been 2 other guys hiding in the shadows that my dad hadn't seen, which is actually creepy in its own right. South Africa's violent crime is quite bad, and it's sickeningly common for torture and rape to happen during home invasions. I was obviously so young at the time, I didn't know the horrors of the world and was just scared of my family getting hurt. Now that I'm older, just the thought of 4 women being in the house and my mom being in nothing but a bath towel gives me chills to this day. The cops said the fact that there were so many guys instead of like 1 to 3 indicates that these guys probably had sinister intentions. Thank goodness nothing happened to my family, and I'm forever thankful for my dad's quick thinking regarding the panic button. Also, I'm glad my dad understands Zulu and could manipulate the situation to benefit us. Lastly, my family will forever be in debt to our good boys and girls that warned us that night. A terrifying, life-changing outcome would have 100% happened that night, had it not been for our incredible doggos. From that day onwards, my dad always gave them leftover rice or meat with their dinner. R.I.P. Impy, Shutu, Dash, Fudge, Wrinkles, and Pikachu. I'm sure there was a special place in heaven reserved for you angels. 2. So this happened a couple months ago, and as I recall the bizarre memory, and feel that enough time has passed now that I can talk about it, I feel inclined to share. It happened shortly after my lunch break. A man came into my work asking where the local bank is. There's one very nearby, so I figured it was an honest mistake. I work the front desk, so I'm accustomed to anyone who comes through those doors, even if the request has nothing to do with where I work. I pointed him in the direction of the closest bank. He seemed to appreciate that, and hung around some more, beginning with introducing himself. Now I'm adjusted to men asking for my name at work. I never tell them more than my first, but I always feel it's my due diligence to put on a friendly face and humor them if they try to engage me in conversation. I'm a very confrontational person, but at work I have a people-pleasing complex, and I always try to go out of my way to make customers feel welcome, even if they're random passers-by that get lost and come in for directions. I didn't think much of it. He asked me if I used the same bank as him. I told him I did, but that I don't use the one near here because I live the other side of town. Stupid, I know. Thankfully, I didn't disclose much else. This opened the floodgates for more questions. How long have I worked here? Do I enjoy my job? Do I like my bank, etc.? It didn't get really weird until he asked me if I ever thought of being an actress. I had no substantial answer to distinguish such a question with, so I asked why he thought that. He told me I looked like an actress and that he thinks I would be really good at it. I didn't know what to say other than, thank you. At this point I was stunned. Innocent small talk just took a weird turn. He told me he's working on a film and was wondering if I would be interested in starring in it. I humored him by saying it sounded interesting and asked him what the project was about. Right away he got defensive and said he wasn't sure if he could trust me with that information yet. Okay, fair enough. "Do you believe in God?" he blurted. Careful to keep my answers neutral, I said, I'm not really sure. I have never thought about it. This isn't exactly far from the truth. I'm agnostic, but with atheist leanings. I decided not to share that latter part with him, as he was clearly a devout Christian. He told me his dream is to spread the word of God and help others find salvation in God through his work. He said he senses that I've been through some dark times, which couldn't be more true. I've been through some shit, and I'm still dealing with the trauma, and asked me if I ever found my way back to God since then. I said it was an ongoing process. I honestly didn't really know what to tell him, so I changed the subject back to his film project, in hopes he'd talk about that instead. He told me he's been working on it for the last 2 years, and that he thinks he's found his lead actress, aka me. He said he has a lot of money to invest in it, and that he hopes he can use it to spread the word of God. "Do not tell anyone about this, though," he warned. "It's confidential for now." I'm just nodding along, completely perplexed by all this, and then he asked for my phone number. I told him I don't give it out. He said he doesn't usually either, but he thinks he can trust me. With that, he wrote down his number and email. At this point, I'm really uncomfortable, and it must have shown on my face because he said, "Don't look so anxious." I smiled and said I'm not. "Well, I am," he said. I asked him what he went, and he just smiled and laughed. Well, that was it, and I just thought it was a strange but kind of funny encounter. It's not every day a girl is propositioned to star in a film, and then asked about her position on our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I'd all but forgotten about it until he came back. He gave me another piece of paper with a different number on it, saying he forgot to give me his alternate contact info just in case. He asked if I had already thrown out the other one. He framed it like he meant it as a joke, but I could tell he was angry at the prospect of if I did. I smiled and said I kept it in my drawer, then took the new one from him and placed it in the drawer as well. That seemed to appease him, and I thought that was it. I asked him if he found the bank okay. "Oh, I knew where it was the whole time," he said casually. I froze, realizing the implication of this statement. He told me it's not often he sees someone in the street that stands out and catches his interest as I had. He said he watches many people as they pass by on the streets, but I am the first that's caught his interest. He knew when he saw me that he found his leading lady. If this wasn't weird enough, he went on to tell me how I looked like a girl he once knew. As he's explaining this, he's fumbling with his phone, trying to find a picture of her. But then he decided against it and said he might text it to me instead. But only maybe. He said he loves her, but now she lives in London and he doesn't see her anymore. "I knew you weren't her when I saw you, but you look like her. You looked interesting. I don't know. I thought she was my girl, but I guess not." I didn't say anything. Words could not be formulated in that moment. "Do you have a man?" he asked me. "Yes, I do." This was true, and I answered without hesitation. "Oh. Have you ever lost one?" This brought on a sharp pang of sadness as memories of my ex came flooding back. He committed suicide last August. To say yes to that question would be an understatement. It was very eerie that he'd ask. Eerier yet that it was true. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded slowly. "Then you must know how I feel." He muttered a few other things under his breath and then left with a goodbye. What I thought was a strange, random encounter turned out to be not so random. I'm a little freaked out knowing this man saw me on the street and felt inclined to follow me into my work. This happened shortly after my lunch break, so I think he must have spotted me and watched where I went. For all I know, this is a one-off, and he'll forget all about me. But this was still very strange and unnerving. 3. This takes place over the course of a few years, from just before my university freshman year to my junior year. I am now a 20-year-old female, but at the start of this story I was 17. For my freshman orientation, my family and I were staying at a hotel across from my college campus. Orientation started in the morning, so I wandered over to campus with my luggage to check into my dorm room for the next few days. I was roomed alone for orientation, since I have OCD and sleeping problems, and didn't want to bother any potential roommates. So I put my luggage away and began walking the campus. The entire fiasco started for one reason: I wanted breakfast. It was foggy that morning, and I had never been on campus. It was always away from my hometown, so I quickly became turned around. I spotted a group of 4 people walking toward a building, so I swallowed my anxiety and approached them to ask for directions. I should add that I'm a shy and quiet person, so it took a bit before I piped up and, "Excuse me." One of the 4 turned around, and my immediate thought was, "Oh God, this guy looks like a fish." He had big, creepy eyes and fat lips. He was blonde and a little chubby. This is purely for descriptive purposes. I am by no means a model. Still, I stifled my gawking and asked, "Do you know where the dining hall is?" "Oh yeah, it's right here." He motioned to the building directly behind us. "Oh wow, I'm dumb," I laughed. There was a small pause before he asked, "You here alone?" As someone who has run into predatory people before, this question never, ever sits well with me. My family will be here later. We all have sleeping problems, so they're catching up on sleep. They'll be here at 6. This wasn't a lie, but I hoped it would deter him from latching onto me. "Oh, well, do you want to sit with us?" I guessed he meant the group of 4 he was in, but the other 3 had already disappeared into the dining hall. "Sure," I conceded. He immediately grabbed a 2-person table, which made me internally groan. I had a feeling of where this was going, and I wanted no part of it. I'm a lesbian, for Christ's sake. I didn't want to risk making him angry. I didn't want someone to hate me before the school year even started, so I sat down with him and a plate of eggs. I tried to make conversation, but he kept replying dryly with things like, "Oh, uh-huh," and "mm-hmm." I thought that I had upset Fishface, so I looked up from my plate to see him staring directly at my breasts. I'm a 36 double D, so I am unfortunately used to this. I sighed and bagged out my sweater around my chest. Even after this and me slouching, he just kept staring. After this, I didn't want anything to do with him, but I wasn't so lucky. Everywhere I went, he followed, even if our orientation events were separate. I repeatedly tried to slip away from him, becoming increasingly creeped out by his attempts at flirting. But everywhere I went, there was Fishface. I gave it one last try, slipping away to the library. That's when the messages started. Somehow Fishface found my Snapchat. I guess that he searched my name. He kept messaging things like, "Where are you? Where did you go? I'm at X location." Knowing that he could see if I'd read them, I felt obligated to respond, "Okay, I'll be there soon." This didn't stop with orientation. The beginning of my freshman year was marred with Fishface encounters, classes, trips to the store, student activities. It didn't matter. He was there, shadowing me. The constant messaging drove me to just delete my Snapchat. Thank Christ he never got my phone number. At this point, Fishface was incessantly hitting on me and reminding me of how much he liked me, despite numerous times of me stating that I'm not interested. When I made myself clear, it only seemed to push him harder, as if he thought I was playing games with him. It became more and more common for him to put his arm around me or try to hold my hand. This is where I drew the line. I told him clear as day, "I am not interested in you, I do not like men, do not touch me." He pouted and relented, touching me at least. The shadowing only got worse to the point that I couldn't leave without my roommate. I couldn't get a single dorm for the actual school year. I became more exhausted, paranoid, and felt like he was a time bomb waiting to blow. After weeks of this, weeks of sheer anxiety, I spoke to the priest at my university. The father was deeply concerned and went so far as to walk me back to my dorm. He made me promise that I would speak to security first thing the next day, which I agreed to. Security's first question was if I was really being stalked or if my anxiety made me believe I was being stalked. When I cited the witnesses to his shadowing me, that was dropped. Then the question was I clear enough with him? I don't know how much clearer I could have been. After much back and forth, I managed to get a no-contact order against Fishface. I knew that a no-contact order only meant that he couldn't contact me, and vice versa, rather than physically keeping him away from me. I was okay with this, because at this point, I did not want to hurt this guy or to potentially impact his future. For the remainder of that year, there were no more attempts to contact me or be near me. I thought that would be the end of it. But then sophomore year came. I could never be sure if it was a coincidence or if he was actually tailing me. But then he started appearing outside of every classroom door, every coffee place, absolutely everywhere. I was in a rough place this year, totally unrelated to this, but it certainly didn't help. But due to the sheer emotional exhaustion I was battling, I couldn't give a damn. Okay, follow me. I promise that I'm not that interesting. But this is when I learned of the other victims. Their stories were identical to mine, 6 of them, mine being the 7th. They ran into Fishface, a totally innocent encounter. But then he started in on them, bombarding them with messages, following them, groping them, and trying to get them alone. I was horrified to find that every one of these other girls had reported him to university security. Every one of them was prescribed a no-contact order. 7 victims later, and this bastard was still on campus as if nothing happened. I learned that this was not uncommon for our university, on top of victim blaming. The more I learned, the more deeply my fear ran. It was open season, and the bastards had full protection. We could not do a thing to get guys like him off of our campus, so I resigned myself to being followed by this fucker. Junior year came around, and initially it seemed that Fishface had given up. I could not have been more wrong. It was pointed out to me by friends who knew about the stalking, that he was in the background of my every move. Throughout the year, he got closer and closer until it became worse than I'd ever dealt with before. I was a member of Campus Conservationists, and we were selling reusable grocery bags in lieu of our state banning plastic bags. And then, after about 45 minutes of peace, I glanced to my right. He was there, just around the corner, staring directly at me. Ice-cold fear ran down my spine and my stomach dropped. I tore my gaze away and tried to hide my panic. He hadn't been this close to me since freshman year. There was no mistaking it. He was here for me and me alone. I texted my girlfriend, letting her know what was happening. I will be honest and say that the rest is a blur. I was too panicked to remember how we got back to my dorm safely. I thank God every day for my ultra-protective girlfriend. Just 2 days after that, he appeared in the hallway outside of my class. It was just reaching the end, and I was ready to call it a day. I glanced at my watch. It was 2:45 p.m. I wandered to the bathroom, ignoring Fishface lurking in the corner. I did my business and approached the door. It began to open, so I called out, "Oh, I got it," and opened it for the next person. Fishface. I felt my face go pale, and my breath hitch. He stared directly at me with those creepy-ass blue eyes, his giant floppy lips pulled into a small smirk, before he turned and disappeared down the hall. My heart thumped in my chest as I re-entered the classroom. I felt myself shaking and tried to hide it. All that kept running through my head was, what was he doing? Why was he trying to get into the bathroom? I glanced down at my watch again and knew that I didn't have time to wait for my girlfriend, as the class was minutes from ending. I asked the girl next to me to walk with me to my next class. She agreed without hesitation. She was a really sweet girl to begin with, and thank God for that. I finished my final class for the day and sped back to my dorm. I didn't get much sleep that night. I reported the incidences to security the next morning. I was met with the same pressing questions and doubts. I threw everything I had at them and asked them to watch the security cameras outside of my classroom to see him attempt to corner me in the bathroom. I had to threaten to contact state police before they relented and promised to investigate my claims. They informed me that no action would be taken. They said that they could find no evidence of the incidences. When questioned, Fishface said that him appearing around my classrooms in frequent spots around campus was purely coincidental, and he felt so awkward that he was going through this again. I took my second semester of junior year off for unrelated reasons. Yet, I am relieved to not be on campus with that creep. He is still there. The other victims have mostly transferred to other universities due to the college's general mistreatment and poor administration. I start my senior year this August at the same university. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if he's going to stop his game. I listen to enough true crime to know what could happen. It scares me like few things ever have. Update. Fishface is gone. He flunked out. Thank God. I finally feel like I'm safe here, and it's a welcome relief. Am I disappointed that he wasn't expelled for all his BS? Yes, but as long as he is gone, I feel okay. I hope everyone else in this situation can take something helpful from my experience. And never hesitate to reach out for help, even if it's to some random Reddit lesbian like myself. I hope you all do well. I know that I will. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 549, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like and subscribe. Comments are also appreciated. And we do have a little bit of a shout out before we go on, and that shout out goes to the author of story number 2. That's the story that took place in South Africa with the brave doggies. And the shout-out goes to Reddit user Midnight Schnacks. Reddit user Midnight Schnacks, thank you very much for allowing us to use your story. Okay, we are on Wednesday now. Alrighty. And that's a dog, okay. You may not have heard the dog, but there was one barking. And then I got distracted by watching clips of Taskmaster on YouTube. I don't even watch the show when it airs, but I seem to watch a lot of clips of it. Anyway, November. Do I have anything in November? I've got a birthday for my nephew in November. Then I just need to do Christmassy stuff. That's it. That's all there is for the rest of the year, I think. Oh well. Sorry folks, just rambling out loud. Like I say, this year has snuck by swiftly. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.